Yes, I think the first important point to make is that Ireland, our banking crisis is at least as big, or was at least as big, if not bigger than that of Cyprus. But we have, by virtue of getting the support of the other European countries, we have been able to put together over 4 or 5 years a programme of action to close the gap between what we spend and what we take in as revenue, to the degree that we've been able recently to start borrowing money commercially rather than relying only on official sources to lend us the money that we needed to keep the state going. And that is an important milestone for us. Now, we're not completely finished the programme. We still have to achieve fully a primary surplus on our budget, which is, I know, something that I think Cyprus aims to do by 2017. But we're able to show that, if you stick to the programme that you have agreed, you will get there.
It's a long, hard road, of course, and there were bubbles along the way, and we've had bubbles here that got us into this mess. You did too in Ireland, didn't you?
Well, I think indeed, and the trouble, really, the lesson that we've learned from this is that a bubble can develop very, very quickly. I think in the case of Cyprus, it developed over a period of 2 years. In our case, I think it was about 3 years. We went from a point of having, relatively sustainable banking sector in 2003 and 2004 to having one that was completely unsustainable by 2008 or 2009. And it's sort of a collective madness that almost takes people over, where they see prices rising, they see their neighbours buying additional properties or adding to their property portfolio, and they see them apparently making money, and nobody wants to be left out of this race. And that involved a lot of people who became infected with this error, and obviously we're paying, all of us, whether we're involved in that or not, are paying a price for it now.
You're a Europhile, I think it's fair to say, and you firmly believe, I think, in the Eurozone and the euro as a currency, but it has had a rocky ride, and I'm wondering whether or not you think that the austerity that we see across the bloc at the moment is the way to achieve the growth that's needed, because we've got to compete, haven't we, with new and emerging markets like China.
I think the underlying problem that Europe as a whole faces is one that we were going to face whether we had a euro or not. The countries of Europe have become largely uncompetitive in the sense that our wages were increasing faster than our productivity, and therefore we weren't able to export as much as we were exporting previously. And that was going to lead, when combined with the fact that our societies are all getting older, there's a problem of, as people retire, the number of people working relative to the number of people retired is reducing, and that creates additional stresses. And that was going to lead to a crisis, one road or another. By virtue of it happening when we are in a single currency rather than outside a single currency with our own currencies, two things are different. Firstly, the route of devaluation, of inflation, of wiping out the value of people's savings by devaluation, that route wasn't open to us. Likewise, we are in a position where, because we're all in a single currency, and everybody has a stake in the success of that currency, there is greater pressure on those who are in a strong financial position to give help to those that are in a weaker position. If there was no euro, we in Ireland would not have been able to get the help that we got from Germany and from France and from Britain and from all those other countries, because they would have just allowed us to devalue our currency and suffer on our own. But by virtue of the existence of the euro, there is that degree of solidarity, because it's solidarity based on self-interest. It's not in the interests of Germany to see Cyprus or Ireland go under, because that would undermine their currency, their money. So they have to help us in order that they can help themselves. And that wouldn't be the case if there was no euro.
No, what do you make of the idea of the bail-in that was enforced on Cyprus?
Well, I was horrified, I must say, at the idea that people with deposits of less than 100,000 euros would have been asked to make any contribution. That was completely against existing EU rules, and admittedly it was a proposal that emerged obviously very late at night at the end of a very long meeting. But the fact that the leaders of Europe would have agreed to such a suggestion I was horrified by it, and I'm glad to say that the Cypriot legislature rejected it.
But don't you think that actually if we'd gone that way, we wouldn't have quite such a long path ahead as we will have now with the way it turned out?
Marginally, I think that I'm not able to do the arithmetic on that. Now you might be able to make that, to do the sums to prove that. But I think you would have had, I think, if that had gone through, a complete loss of confidence in deposits in banks generally. I mean, we're not talking about having no haircuts, we're simply talking about having haircuts below 100,000, and that was the figure that had been agreed in EU directives that would be guaranteed, and people would not be asked to make a sacrifice below that figure. And the fact that European authorities came up with that idea, to my mind, was very, very mistaken. But it does show that the European Union is a human institution with human beings meeting around the table, very often under great stress, and we will make mistakes from time to time. And I think this was a mistake that was put forward, but I'm glad to say it didn't go into effect.
Well, I'm sure that, among many other things, but hopefully it's no good looking back, and tomorrow's conference will be more on looking forward. Before you go, John, can I just ask you, because it's fascinating that when it comes to Cyprus and Ireland, we seem to have many things in common. We have a many Irish people in Cyprus. I don't know about the other way round, but not just in terms of the economy. I'm thinking now in terms of the Cyprus problem. You were very much involved, I think, in helping to solve, is it solved, the Irish problem? It's certainly the peace plan and so on seemed to come up with a formula. Do you see any other similarities, if you like, between the two countries?
Well, I think what we succeeded in doing is stopping the killing and getting people to fight out their arguments through political methods rather than through the use of the gun. Now, there is still tension, obviously, in Northern Ireland between the two communities, and while there is a lot of mutual understanding in certain parts of the community, there are still areas where there have to be peace walls erected, literally to keep people apart so that they won't fight with one another or that they will feel secure. But we have, I think, at political level, achieved a great deal in putting together an administration in Northern Ireland which has all the parties and of both sides of the political divide represented in the government. And it's functioning reasonably well. They've even been able to agree, which isn't ever easy for politicians to agree, on cuts in spending and how they would share out the cuts in spending, which is not something you'd expect from a government with every party in it. They still were able to get unanimity on this. But there is still work to be done in building relationships between the communities and making the peace a true reconciliation and not just an absence of violence. As far as how this could be applied in Cyprus, I think the thing that I certainly learned from my involvement in it is that it's very important to study the history as seen by the other side, not just to understand your own history and your own point of view, but to understand history as they see it and try in whatever solutions you put forward to present your ideas in such a fashion that they are reconcilable with their view of history and that they can see that their history is being respected, because a lot of these conflicts are about respect as much as anything else.
Yeah, so I suppose it's an open-mindedness that you're saying people need to be able to look through the curtain and see things from a different point of view. Very difficult to do that sometimes, isn't it?
It's extremely difficult, but basically I use the analogy. If you can, rather than insisting that the problem be approached in your particular way, that if you like, the hay is brought to market on your wagon, if you can persuade them that if you can somehow or other use their ideas and their framework and build your interests onto their framework, sometimes you can find a solution that you wouldn't find if you insist on only approaching it from your own perspective. Now, how that could be, that insight, so far as it's valid, can be applied in Cyprus is, of course, something that is very difficult for me to say.
All right, and back finally to the fact that you're the head of the Irish Financial Services Centre now. What does that do? Do we need something similar here in Cyprus so that we can sort of have a clearer path out of the mess?
Well, indeed, Ireland and Cyprus have that in common as well, that we both aspire to be major financial centres. In the case of Cyprus depended very greatly on an offshore banking system with deposits attracted from outside. We in Ireland have not been in that field quite so much as Cyprus has. We've rather been involved in the administration of funds for collective investment, in the management of some of these funds, selecting the things in which they might be invested, reinsurance and insurance, international reinsurance and international insurance, locating some of the back office facilities in Ireland. And obviously Cyprus is a very attractive place to live, as Ireland is, and therefore it could be attractive if it puts the right package together to particular niches of international financial management of the kind that Ireland is also involved in.
But again, it's got to be competitive, hasn't it? Because we've got so much competition from other parts of the world.
Yes, and I think you probably have to aim to be good in a few sectors. You can't cover every form of finance. We in Ireland have been good in the ones I've mentioned, and also in aircraft leasing. And I'm sure Cyprus, looking at the evolution of the financial markets, will be able to find particular niches which would be suitable to your geography and the skill sets that you have available. And obviously in the existing banks there's going to be a lot of skilled people who probably will not be able to continue in their present employment, who would be available for other forms of activity. And that's where I think a bit of ingenuity needs to be applied to find new forms of international finance that these skills can be put to use in.